Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Come on, morning. I'm talking about the people down there, not you all. Anyway, this is going to be kind of an interesting panel. So oftentimes when we talk about digital twins, right? The promise of digital twin, moving from the conversation and the theory to actual implementation. And when we talk about implementation and we talk about the cloud is actually what? On the ground. And the cloud is actually in our neighborhoods. And so, as part of this conversation, we talk about technology, and we often talk about apps, but really the infrastructure behind the technology is really what's going to help the promise become reality. So, I want to introduce my panel, have you all introduce yourself. And by the way, my name is Keith Carswell, Director for the Department of Economic Innovation Development with the City of Miami. And to my left,
good morning, everyone. Jessica Fernandez Ibarra. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I head up external affairs and policy for Crown Castle on the East Coast. And I'm happy to talk about infrastructure with you guys today.
Hi, everybody. My name is Hugues Morin. I'm the SLED director for the Southeast at Intel Corporation. It's a pleasure to be here.
My name is Lenny Chesal. I am the chief evangelist for I Am Critical, a 100,000 square foot data center in Miami with a location up in Pittsburgh. I'm a serial volunteer, and I get to work on this really cool project with Keith and company. So thanks for having us.
all right. So when we talk about digital twin and with the new technology now, what has, and I'm going to kind of kick it to you, Lenny, what has changed recently?
Everything is subject to change on a daily basis.
Expound.
Of course. So Moore's Law, you're familiar with that. The increase in density for power, for computing, for cooling, in the world of being able to develop a digital twin, again, back to infrastructure, it's important that we understand what's required to run, you said apps, but it's really not apps. It's all of the information that's required to develop a digital twin. So what's changed is the requirement to not only meet the current demands, but to see into the near future and even the near distant future. And how do you do that? I don't have a crystal ball, but read.
So, Hugues, what is Intel doing in that space?
So three things that I think have changed and are changing right now. The first one is edge is becoming real, right? The compute is moving towards the edge. That's a reality. And with the combination of Moore's Law that you announced with free beer too, AI is now, because of accelerator built into the processing power, AI is also moving to the edge, right? And it's efficient to go in places where it's contained. The third thing that is changing is I think people really want outcome, right, in digital twin. They don't, or they're past visualization or a cool dashboard into, hey, we really want outcomes and results. That's your case, at least.
No, and speaking from a telecommunications infrastructure perspective, we need that densification of small cells and fiber, right where the data is being collected, right? Whether that be from sensors and other IoT devices. I really think of this connectivity as civic infrastructure, right? And its ability to be able to collect the data, crunch it nearby, and then be able to provide city administrators and leaders with the ability to make decisions in real time. And so as we look towards what's next, I think that we need to look at permitting and how do we create ease, speed, and predictability, that policy that will enable builders to be able to get the infrastructure built as quickly as possible, and not just build it quickly, but overbuild, right? Build for the future. We need to build at scale, so that we're not inconveniencing, the users, right? In the right of way, and so and also workforce readiness, I think is something that we need to look at.
So before we get a little further into some of the use cases and how it can actually enhance our lives, let's try to define what is a data center. because up here in Palm Beach, there's been some pushback about a certain type of data center. But Lenny, I Am Critical is a data center that's in Little River, Little Haiti, in Miami, and how did that happen? And can you give us the parameters of what that data center looks like?
Sure. So my data center was built 100 years ago. So it's a little different than trying to build a hyperscale data center out in the, if you will, the woods or the fields, because that was really all previous farmland where they're looking to build that. So the environmental impact, which actually overlays with the digital twin, the environmental impact of expanding a regional data center of 100,000 square feet that previously had approximately 7 megawatts of power. If we tried to get to 50 megawatts of power in that data center, you're reliant on permitting of either self-generated power, which can be done through turbines today using natural gas, but that takes a big footprint. It takes permitting. It takes acceptable use in the community because we are in a community. We're not out in the farm fields. And so to enable a regional data center to handle the new density that I mentioned of power and cooling, you need additional power. It's not available from the power company. I'm not sure if anybody's here from FPL today, but please come help me. But because they really can't, you can't create power where there isn't. You have to generate your own power. So the hurdle to take an existing building, which was rebuilt 25 years ago and then rebuilt again when we bought it 4 years ago, is the accessibility and or the availability of power. So without power, you don't have what you need. And so that's really the big challenge. So for us, we've got 15 network carriers. You're not going to get that out in the field. So it's really more about accessibility through Crown Castle and our other fiber providers in the data center, that it's near, right? So when you're running these digital city type of the huge amounts of data, the speed of light is your enemy. So if you can't actually pull an autonomous vehicle into a depot, what's the next best thing? A hyperscale network that's running at 400 gig. There's a wireless person over here doing 400 gig. Our customers are running at 800 gig. The amount of bandwidth that it requires to have real-time access to this data could be a life or death situation.
So you want to kind of lean into it a little bit, Hugues, because I think you're talking about what return trip time for autonomous vehicles, less than 10 milliseconds. But kind of talk about that and how autonomous vehicles in general, eVTOLs, we have some folks from Archer and a couple of the electric vertical takeoff and landing space. So can you talk about some of that technology, but also what is Intel doing in some of the hyperscale facilities too, in terms of reducing power consumptions and making them more efficiency with the PUEs?
Yeah, so we're doing a lot of things, right? Internally, I was sharing with Keith recently that we probably run the most efficient data center in the world at 1.06 PUE, right? In air-cooled. Wow. So, and that's done via a few things, right? Clearly having the right tool for the right job, right? And making sure that you're running efficiently in all spaces. Connectivity is a key thing in the data center, silicon photonics. So, I think whether you're talking about autonomous vehicles or any other application, your use case and what you're doing is going to dictate what type of latency you need to be coping with, and the latency will decide where the compute needs to happen, right? So we've been involved with autonomous vehicles for a long time. Moore's law is at work there. I think Waymo, the first time that we deployed with them, you had a couple Xeons, like 4 Xeon, like a couple dual Xeon servers in each car. So you don't need that anymore because there's accelerators built into the architecture that make it very efficient to run locally. And you need to run some of the compute locally before you connect to the data center, update the model, upload it, upload the learnings, download the latest model, and make sure that you don't kill anybody and you differentiate what.
That's really important, by the way.
Yeah, that's it. That's pretty much it. And we're involved in everything between, from data center connectivity into edge computing with these accelerators.
And so, Jessica, you kind of alluded to it also. But when we talk about the efficiencies, right, the technology is moving in terms of direct chip cooling, submersive cooling. That is workforce opportunity, right? And I guess you all are really in the trenches, no pun intended, with Crown Castle in inputting the infrastructure. So what have you seen in terms of the evolution of the workforce or the need for workforce development, and then also your role in terms of technology evolution?
So, what we see in terms of workforce needs is we're going to need a lot more fiber splicers. That's going to become the new welder, right? That to kind of go back to what you were alluding to, the infrastructure is not in the cloud. It's not on the rooftops. It's at the curb. And so we're going to need those, we don't have AI bots yet to do all the actual construction and configuration of the radios and things like that. And so we're going to need a lot of workers to be able to build the density. And just as an example, my company has nationally over 40,000 cell towers, and we have currently over 105,000 small cells on air or under contract, and over 5,000 of that here in the state of Florida for small cells. Are you familiar with what a small cell is? No, okay. So a small cell, it looks like a utility pole, and it has a radio equipment on top. A lot of times we have equipment attached or concealed on there, and basically it's like a mini cell tower, bringing the connectivity closer to where the user is. So it doesn't have to, the signal doesn't have to travel as far to a tower. You want get your signal as quickly as possible onto fiber. We still haven't beat the speed of light, Lenny, on the fastest transport mode for data. And so when we're talking about companies that we're gonna have to do a lot of different workforce upskilling, right? I see my friend Adrian here from Zooks. When you have these life or death situations, when you have a car having to make these decisions, you need that infrastructure as close to where the decision is being made. Lives are on the line, and so I think that there's a lot of opportunity at the local colleges to be able to provide the skills and training on a quick basis, right? And get people ready for that.
So some of the examples that sometimes we don't think about, you step into an autonomous vehicle, driverless vehicle. It's going down the road at a certain speed, within the speed limit, and it has to make a decision whether a pedestrian steps in the road or an animal step in the road or in another lane. That car has to make a decision whether to swerve left or right, or if there's another vehicle next to it. That decision is not, it can't go to Montana in order to be able to compute and make that distinction. That has to be done locally, correct? I mean,
you would want that decision to be made as quickly as possible, which means bringing it down to like the curb level, like I was saying before.
So when we talk about the cloud, again, the cloud, you say at the curb, I say the cloud is actually in our neighborhoods. Hugues, you want to kind of lean into that a little bit?
For me, the cloud is an architecture, right? So it's that people think of the cloud like, the public clouds out there, the Azure and the Google clouds of this world. Cloud is an architecture, and the world that we live in right now is multi-cloud. So you want to have, clearly processing under your control, right? And you want to make sure that you have the right processing and flexibility, not only for today's deployment, but for the future. And then leverage all the different clouds that exist for specialized work or disaster recovery or peaks and valleys in your cycles.
So, regardless of where that cloud infrastructure is, you cannot have this conversation without thinking about how do you protect it, and what are the cyber threats, and is it containerized, and is it anonymized, and is it... So you have a lot of compliancy that's been happening over the years for traditional infrastructure, but where is that in the world of AI today, and have we even scratched the surface on how when the worker in your office is going to Chat GPT or Claude or wherever they're going, and they're uploading, well, here's my marketing plan, here's my financials, can you help me clean this thing up? It's no longer private. So the human aspect of that cyber threat is also critical. So, as we speed through this Moore's Law, hockey stick growth of all these applications, if you're not thinking ahead and not just future-proofing your network, future-proofing your infrastructure, that you're not future-proofing everything that you build today with cyber in mind, you're exposing yourself in a way that's frightening, especially when it comes to life and death.
Well, we talked about data, right? And I think you kind of touched on a little bit about sovereignty of data. You can be a corporation, you can be a law firm or accounting firm. Do you want your data in Montana somewhere? Or do you want it kind of close to home? Do you want it on-prem? And if that is the case, do you see a trend, and this is for the three of you, where there's a lot of focus is going to shift from hyperscale facilities more into the metro area, into high dense urban core, where actually the activity is happening. So I'm going to kick that to you, Jess.
Look, as an infrastructure provider, think of us as the 95 of data, right? We are the transport mode for data, right? So right now, the only constraint is how many lanes can you afford to build on 95 to transport this data, and we do so securely. We have dedicated fiber strands for our customers, and for the wireless carriers. I think of data as being the new oil, right? From 2023 to 2024, CTIA, which is an industry association for telecom, shared that data consumption in the United States increased over 40% just in 1 year. And we've seen data grow every year consistently, 20%, 30% since COVID. And so, how many wearables do we have on us right now, and how much, data are we consuming? It's breathtaking how much data we're consuming. And so we are very happy to provide that infrastructure and bring it down to the neighborhood.
Yeah, no, you touched, Lenny, you both touched on very important points, but Lenny talked about the privacy AI and protecting the data, right? So you will have a lot of data silos created as you move towards a smart city, and breaking those silos, having the right architecture and the right data access, data controls, cybersecurity, and management, right? Making sure that the right data is at the right place, well protected, and then more often than not, bringing the processing to the data versus the opposite, and having the right architecture to control your cost as well, right? In that multi-cloud environment, it's going to be critical. So often, I say you start by the use case, but it will bring you down to what's the architecture, what's the plan, what's the vision down the road to be able to build something that's going to be scalable in the future, because your first use case might be your proof point, but it's not going to be it's not the end game, right? So all that you guys have mentioned, it's critical, right?
So you probably haven't heard these two letters today, AI. And you won't for the rest of the day. This will be the last time you hear it. So in the world of cyber, because I love that space, even though I'm in the data center space, in the world of cyber, the bad guys have AI. I don't know if you knew that. Raise your hand if you knew the bad guys had AI. And so are we showing up like, what was that, where they had the fight, Raiders of the Lost Ark. Don't show up to a gunfight with a knife. If you're showing up at work and you're responsible for the security of your infrastructure and the data and the sovereignty of your information, and all you've got is a firewall and maybe some detection, and you've trained your people, don't, click on a link. Stop. Think. You need to fight the bad guys AI with good guy AI. And so as you're looking to protect your infrastructure, find out not where the current technology is, where is the technology going, or where is the latest greatest technology that's addressing the current, but not just current. This is the whole future proof. Where is that world going? They have more money than we do because they're extracting millions of dollars from corporations every single day with ransom. That's still happening every single day. And so the money that's being spent on your current, and you think you're okay, it's like going to your therapist. You ever been to a therapist? You go to your therapist and the therapist says, "How you doing?" "I'm great." That's when they worry.
Exactly. And really, your data is worth more than gold. And with your data and enough data points, someone can know how you're going to vote, what you're going to eat, where you're going. There's so much information to be learned from just data. But we talked on sovereignty. We talked on the need in terms of connectivity. What are some of the pain points? We talked about power. Now let's have a realistic conversation about power and some of the solutions for, let's say, off-grid power supply, because I know some people in the audience are kind of interested in that. I won't call you out, Travis, but anyway, but we talked about, so you want to talk about what you've seen in terms of off-grid power supply, and we just kind of go around?
He pointed to you.
He pointed me.
Both of you, starting with you, Lenny.
Okay. Travis, I'm not going to call you out either, bro. So, power to the people, power to the data center. It's ridiculous, it's painful, and if you want to learn a little bit about what's happening in the data center space, there's a newsletter that I read every day. It's called Data Center Dynamics, DCD. Write it down. It's a really good one. I wake up in the morning. I wish everybody happy birthday on LinkedIn. If you want to connect to LinkedIn, connect with me, Lenny Chesal. Here's the point. I may be the only birthday wish you get, but I guarantee you I'm going to wish you a happy birthday because that's how I spend my first 15 minutes every morning. More importantly, Data Center Dynamics talks about the changes in the data center industry and their ability to not find power. You can't find power. You can find gold easier than you can find power. You said it's gold. You have to generate power, and how do you do that? Jessica brought up permitting. I love the time that I invited Keith to my data center, and he happened to have his permitting person there. And they went and they had lunch afterwards, and he said, when Lenny comes to us for a permit, it's really important because we need their data center so we can do our digital twin project here in Little River and Little Haiti. You can't find power. You've got to generate your own power. Are we going to allow a nuclear plant in a community? Raise your hand if you want one in your backyard. I know.
This
Just
isn't
to fry
the
the
70s
neighbors.
nuclear. This isn't your mom's nuclear. This is 2026.
What about hydrogen? Shall we do some kind of fission or fusion? Let's have some nuclear, whatever. The thing is, right now, it would appear to me, from where I sit, that a natural gas turbine generator is the natural. So we've got a gas company in Miami. They do have gas. It's not from black beans because we're in Miami. They can deliver gas. But the pipes are too small, so they've got to build bigger pipes. They need a bigger highway to deliver the gas. And then you're talking millions and millions and millions of dollars to either use a virtual utility, which is a term I'd never heard until I met the guys we're working with, and they're going to stack up 2.5 megawatt generators. That's about the size of a tractor trailer. How many tractor trailers do you have room for in your parking lot? Not a whole lot. So do you stack them up? Do you buy the lot next to your building for $8 or $10 or $13 million? Here's the deal. It costs a shipload of money. I used the P there. A shipload of money to create your own power. It is not inexpensive. And oh, by the way, talk about a new challenge. From the time we started our negotiations with the gas company and the generator company, the only variable in their billing is the cost of natural gas. Welcome to the Strait of Hormuz.
Well, I want to compliment what Lenny said by saying that there's also sometimes you cannot get more power, so you need to be more efficient. So I think efficiency is as important as performance. Demand's not going to go down. I'm sorry for breaking the news, right? But there's a way to do better with what we have, right? And that's why it often comes to the architecture. In the data center, you can consolidate server 15, 20, 25 to 1 just by the power of Moore's law, refreshing old infrastructure. The same way that cities will have incentives to remove old cars that are gas guzzlers and not as energy efficient as the new ones, right? And having the right tool for the job. Driving the SUV to work when you're one person is not the most efficient thing. So a big GPU farm is not always the answer. And that's why I'm saying that the compute needs to happen, or the right tool. You need the right tool for the right job.
And by the way, sorry, but when we get to quantum computing, take everything we just talked about and turn it on its head.
And it's right around the corner.
Look, I think it's just power is policy, right? If you want to have the cities of tomorrow, if you want to be able to compete for the best cities to live in, you have to have the power. We have to have the power to the people.
Power to the people. I guess that's going to be one of the takeaways from today. But one of the things that we've gone back and forth on our digital twin, we narrowed it down to one of the first use cases is going to be flooding, right? So for those out there, let's talk about architecture, and let's talk about how to begin with the end in mind. I think what you kind of mentioned as well, Jessica. So, but Hugues, I'm going to kick it to you first about the architecture and that practical use case and what we're doing as we build that out.
Yeah, I think in this case we went, as I said, right, from what do we want to do, what is the use case, then we're talking about architecture, data, what is the right infrastructure that we want to put in place, not only for that use case, but for the future. And that's key, because if you think about a digital twin in the city, if it runs well, the system's going to be able to grow, but it's also going to help for real-time decision making, not just a fancy dashboard, as I said in the beginning. And that's the outcome. The outcome is servicing better the citizens of the city, and that's what you want to have. And you need to, it's sometimes boring, right? And it's sometimes not what we want to do, but you really need to go look into the details and what is the infrastructure that I'm going to need to be able to support the outcome.
Because we're talking predictive analytics at some point, and we're going to need the infrastructure in place in order to be able to do that the highway. We're going to need, there's a conversation about how much is going to be on-prem versus in the cloud. So those are
what data I need to bring in from what sources, how do I protect that data, all of this is critical.
It's a real case. It's a real thing. So summing up, what are some of the key takeaways, Jessica, that you think that anyone out there that's looking at endeavoring along digital twins, smart city initiatives? I got my former colleague, Nikki Demko, back there who works for Palm Beach County. What are those folks, what should she kind of take away from this conversation, you think?
We're going to need a bigger boat. We're going to need more infrastructure. We're going to need to think about infrastructure differently. We're going to need to say okay to doing different techniques for construction that have never been done before. If we continue to use the techniques and the technology that we have today, we're never going to make it. We need to reform permitting. We need to think about this as resiliency for our community. That's my biggest takeaway.
Hugues?
I agree with needing a bigger boat. I think the strength that we have is we're part of a vast ecosystem, and we're going to need everybody to contribute. And again, I'm going to go back and being efficient and using the right tool for the job and doing things the right way.
All right. And Lenny?
So in the world we live in today, first of all, we need each other. Nobody becomes themselves by themselves. And we're all dependent on each other. We're all dependent on each other here. We're all dependent on you. We live in your cities. We work in your cities. And remember that the people who live and work in your cities is why we're doing this. And so for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. But think about what the equal or opposite reaction of the end user is. Don't build something because you think it's bigger and better and cooler and faster. Build it because it's going to make the citizens in your communities safer, more efficient, happier, and just let's all get along and let's have a day where we're all working towards something that's special and important.
And also, I would say a paradigm shift, because normally when we talk about AI or you hear AI, those two letters, people think about loss of jobs. But actually, based on our conversation, there's a creation of jobs. There's a lot of opportunity in terms of infrastructure. So the technology moving from the direct chip cooling workforce, you have guys pulling wires and copper.
Plumbers,
all day.
welders, electricians,
Electricians.
construction workers. Yes.
A lot of what Intel's doing from a workforce development is in the use of AI, not for the infrastructure, right? So we work with from K-12 to universities. We have a tremendous amount of curriculum, not only and it doesn't promote a specific tool, and it's not only on AI specifically, but critical thinking, right? Which is a key part into AI. So if you have questions about it, I think we're out of time, but feel free to grab me after.
And I think AI is not going to be able to wire or figure out how to connect conduits. And so those are opportunities for some of the folks, if you think, and again, it's not sexy, we call it blue-collar tech. The HVAC technicians, the welding.
Highly lucrative.
Highly lucrative. Those are the next millionaires.
They make money a lot faster than doctors do.
With a lot less debt.
All right, I think we've run out of time, but hit us up on the side if you want to continue the conversation. Thank you for
very
your
much.
time. All right.
Thank you, Keith.